Billionaire from Alex, ladies and gentlemen, your boy Monde. Today, what a special interview this is, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the one and only Janet Smith, author extraordinaire, writer, storyteller, entrepreneur, mother, wife. She just told me she was momming this morning. So yeah, very interesting times, ladies and gentlemen. So, Miss Janet Smith, how are you today?
I'm very, very good. Nice to be here with you.
Oh, I'm great. Thank you for making time for us and my viewers here, the All Lifers, because our channel is called All Things Live TV. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't liked, please do so. Share this video because some great things are going to be coming up right now. So, Ms. Smith, just a short introduction of yourself, who you are, what you do. I've just actually introduced you with all these beautiful titles. So, yes, how about you just lay the groundwork for us?
Sure. Well, I was a journalist for 27 years and a newspaper editor.
Okay.
And then have the great fortune to still have a youngish child. He's 10. So when he went to school, we decided it was a good time to stay at home and write books.
Wow.
So I have been doing that. I had written books before I finished working, but now I think the Patrice Motsepe is the 9th book that I've either written, co-authored, ghostwritten, and it's my first love. I love books. I love process of writing. I love book people. Yeah.
Wow, okay. So, Janet, as a billionaire from Alex, I try and read about 4 books a month. Back in the heydays, it was very, very important. You know, they said the average billionaire reads about 4 books a month. So, how many books do you read? Just an author or a writer? Let's just start there quickly.
I'm impressed by 4. I try to read 2. But I try to have one fiction book and one non-fiction book going on at the same time. Also, I can't read non-fiction without a pen in my hand.
Yes.
So every book I buy, every book I read is covered in my own notes, my own underlining. So that's also a process on its own. Yeah.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. And what makes a good book, in your opinion? Whether it's fictional or non-fictional?
Yeah, I think non-fiction, it's a very, very complicated skill as a writer to replicate this. But non-fiction means talking directly to the audience you imagine. And also, as a writer, you're only ever writing for one person. And that's a very important thing to remember. You're not writing for the millions who you hope might buy your book. You're only ever writing, so it's just Janet to Monde. And that is how you should be thinking as a writer. In a very, in a conversation like this, with a lot of history, with a lot of context, but not too complicated, not too highbrow, at a level where your readers can access it without having to keep on going back to the beginning where you started.
Wow. So in a world of online media and audio books, yes, there we go, where someone can listen to a book being read, and also ebooks as well. Do you think physical copies or even authoring is just as important right now as maybe printing it out, getting a publisher? Do you think it's important in the day we live in, or it's just slowly fading away?
I think it's absolutely critical, and I think Book Talk shows us that people are, young people are loving reading.
Yes.
I think that's been a revelation to everybody, because if you want to monitor how successful the act of writing, the art of writing is, just have a look at the numbers for Book Talk. It's a very diverse world too. So the fiction that I like is most certainly not the fiction that maybe somebody half my age will like. But there will be authors we share a love of, and that's what brings us together. And I think books are a little bit like sport.
Okay.
If you like a particular sport, you're always going to find something in common with somebody else who enjoys that sport. So you don't have to share the same background, but you certainly will have that in common, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, definitely. I can agree to that, Janet, because personally, when I read a book from a physical copy, even studies have proven this, that you tend to retain the information more and better than reading it from maybe a laptop or a tablet or just listening to it. But obviously, we are human beings. We are diverse and different. So just the pointers out there to the all-lifers, guys, I think reading a physical book and making notes. You spoke about having a pen when you're reading a non-fictional book. Making those notes, underlining, circling, and just taking down some points is very, very important. And what do you think reading can do to a young person's mind here, Janet? Because most of my viewers are young people, who are still trying to hustle, just trying to make their best out of their life. So South Africa has got one of the lowest literacy levels in the world, right? So how do you think reading can play an important role in the life of a young person, or even maybe a young teenager or a child that is still growing?
To my mind, reading is pretty much everything in most careers and most ways in which you study. So I think also my own experience, I have 4 children. They are in 2 different generations. So I have a son of 31 and a daughter of 33.
Wow.
And then I have a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Okay. Was that planned or?
I think what is strange is that my older children were born when I was in my early 20s. And now I have these younger children when I'm in my mid-50s.
Yes.
And that has helped me to try and live in a contemporary world as much as possible.
Yes.
Because you need to, as a parent, as a mother, you need to also understand the world your children live in. But throughout, with all 4 of them, books and reading to them has been such a wonderful part of parenting. So I think reading and books are a critical part of also understanding the different worlds that we're in. So my interest is in this continent, so African literature, South African literature, African non-fiction, South African non-fiction. And before you can enter the international arena, you have to know the country you're in, the continent you're on. And so that's also allowed me to draw closer to my children, because we can share books, we can talk about the books, and remembering that you also occupy an ideological and political space.
Wow.
So the books you choose will show where you are on that line.
Ladies and gentlemen, need I say more? Readers are leaders and leaders are readers. That's exactly why I started making sure that I at least try to read as many books as I can. But obviously it's up and down, sometimes I read 4, sometimes just 1 and all. But let's try and read. So Janet, I just want to get into the work you've done now with the books you've authored. You spoke about writing, co-authoring more than 9 books, but I want to talk about the big ones that really, really attracted me to your work now. I want to speak about the Chris Hani autobiography. Can you please just give us the name quickly?
Sure. So it's Hani, A Life Too Short.
Hani, A Life Too Short. Must read, ladies and gentlemen. Get your hands on that book. We'll give you information as to where you can find Janet's work, which shops and so forth, right? We speak about Chris Hani, A Life Too Short, The Coming Revolution, that you co-authored with Advocate Dali Mpofu and Mr. Floyd Shivambu, the Deputy President of the EFF. Now your latest work is Patrice Motsepe, An Appetite for Disruption. First and foremost, I want to know, Janet, how do you get a hold of such great men's stories, or how do you get into close contact with them and actually allowing them to write, or them giving you permission to write about their life?
Sure. I was thinking about this the other day, Monde. I was thinking about how incredibly fortunate I am. Yes, I have been.
Hopefully that fortune can rub off me today.
Yes, absolutely. Because we are all incipient billionaires. I think we all hope that. Even the socialists among us.
Okay.
It says a socialist cannot be a billionaire.
Oh, come on now, Janet. Let's not ruffle a few feathers here today.
But I think 27 years of journalism has helped me a lot.
Yes.
Journalism is an arena in which you do have opportunities other people don't necessarily get.
Okay.
To be introduced to people, to gain access to people, to broaden a contact book. But it is a lot of work. It is a lot of very hard work. Fortunately, journalism is not as formalized now as it used to be when I started out.
Wow.
So my first big stories were in fact in the early 90s when South Africa was in transition. So I've been sort of building it up since then, and I still am. I'm still gaining numbers for my contact book. I'm still gaining introductions that will help me in the future. But certainly I can't say that without those decades of journalism I would have been able to have the access that I have. Yeah.
Wow, so it's been years and years of work, and also having a reputable, what can I say, reputation in a way, and also reputable context within the journalism industry that has made you to actually be in close contact with such great men. Because some people are asking, wow, I wish I could meet Chris Hani, or maybe even write about his life. How does one get a hold of Mr. Motsepe? Like, he's so busy, and all the politicians are trying to campaign now with the elections coming up in 2024. So let's just start with Chris Hani's book quickly, A Life Too Short. What made you decide you want to write about him? How did you get in contact with the family, the permission to go ahead and write about his life?
Sure. So the way that this happened really was in 2008, when I was still at the Star. A fellow journalist and a friend of mine, Trump, we were marking the 20th anniversary of Hani's assassination.
Yes.
And we did a sort of a series to really look at that properly. And then we were approached by a publisher to write a book. Unbelievably, Monde, there was no biography of Chris Hani at that point.
Wow.
And I have to say that even now, on the cusp of the 30th anniversary, our book is the only long-form biography
of such a great man.
Of such a great man. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. The one is that people do feel anxious about entering that sort of realm. You know, are you allowed to write a biography of anybody you like? How many people do you have to approach to ask if you may do it? And maybe journalism makes you a little bit maverick, or a little bit reckless in that sense. But I think the advice I want to give anybody out there, you know, perhaps watching this and thinking, can they write a biography? You can write about anybody you like without asking permission. You don't need to get permission. You do need to make sure that you're a good researcher. You do need to make sure that your writing is at a standard where people would want to read it. But you don't have to be fearful. You can have a look at the world you're in and be curious enough to approach anybody you like.
Wow. Yeah.
Of course, people who are no longer with us, Chris Hani, for example, how can I put this? People who are no longer alive, dead people, they're open season. When somebody is no longer with us, you can write anything you like about them. They are no longer present to contest that. However, your own levels of dignity apply. If you want to write in a again, an undignified way, a graceless way about somebody who is no longer alive, it's on you.
But now, don't you think that's a bit dangerous in the sense of you could have a certain bias against a person? Like, for example, let's just say someone might decide, oh, this person was a dictator, but in actual fact, he was just not. It's the way you've written about the story of the person, or it's maybe the style of your writing that has portrayed this person as a dictator while he's not. So don't you think there's a danger maybe it might have a certain bias or certain prejudice about someone's life now that they're no longer around to share their own story?
Yes, completely. But in a way, you know, I think at this point in my life, I'm very, very open-minded but only to anybody on the left. So I have a very closed mind to people who are on the right. So what is very difficult for somebody like me is if I see a book about Trump, for example, about Donald Trump, I'm going to, before I spend the many hours, days, and sometimes weeks that it takes to read a book about Trump, I'm going to make sure the writer fits with my ideological perspective.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't want to make the time. I'm not going to be persuaded into a right-wing point of view.
Why not?
It's not possible. It's not possible. I'm already there. I'm already on the left. I already know what space I occupy intellectually, and I'm not going to go anywhere else.
But what if it could be subject to change, or the left could be under scrutiny all of a sudden in the days?
Sure. I'm thinking about Rishi Sunak becoming the Prime Minister of the UK in the last 24 hours as we sit here.
Yeah.
I think there are things about that are important. We cannot discard the fact that he's the first person of Asian descent to occupy that role.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that Rishi Sunak's version of politics is something that I can support. Rishi Sunak is still a capitalist. He's a banker by profession. He occupies a tax bracket that is subject to tax laws the ordinary person in the UK will never have access to.
Okay.
So I'm still on the side of the left in the UK. So that would be the Labour Party, that would be workers, that would be people who support socialism in different forms. So I'm interested in him as a person, but analysis of him would only interest me if it's coming from that perspective.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. Talking about being on the left and socialism, it leads me on to my second point now with the books you've written. The coming revolution. Now, we just had a joke before the interview saying the revolution is not there. What's your take on the African or the Black revolution since you wrote a book with these two great men in the EFF, Advocate Dali Mpofu and also Mr. Floyd Shivambu, the Deputy President of the EFF? What's your take on the Black revolution or the African revolution?
Well, I think I had the privilege, let's say, of spending about 2 hours with Julius Malema about 3 weeks ago.
Wow!
But we were talking about Chris Hani.
Yes.
That was why I was with him, because at the moment I'm trying to gather different perspectives on what has been achieved or what has not been achieved over the last 30 years. And so I think where Malema and I are very much in agreement, even though we are people from different generations, and we have different pasts, is that Hani was assassinated by the system. What is the system? Well, the system is those forces which were uncomfortable with Hani's vision for South Africa, which would have been that before you embark on any policy that will benefit the middle class, that will benefit the 1%, you need to first ensure that the poor, the working class, have a future. Because without ensuring they exist in a free space, they're allowed to also own the means of production. They're allowed to also seek a happy life. As even Marx and Engels said, happiness is critical to any country's success. And that is really the revolutionary intent. So when we spoke about, when in fact it wasn't my decision for the title, it was Floyd Shivambu's decision as to what the title would be, The Coming Revolution. It hasn't been achieved. It probably needs your generation, Monde. It's a work in progress.
What if my generation is right?
It's such a difficult one. it's such a difficult one. At times, I listen to the EFF's leaders speaking.
Okay.
And, you know, they sound, let's say, to some people, they might sound as if they are almost right-wing. Remembering that to some people in our society, the ANC itself is a nationalist organization. The PAC and the ANC had those difficulties in the late 50s around what is nationalism, what is Africanism, what is Pan-Africanism. So those debates are very important to be had. And you honestly cannot have those debates without reading widely so that you can make your decisions intellectually based on what you've read.
So in that book, The Coming Revolution, what are, maybe let's just give us maybe a few pointers, main pointers that you actually write about together with the two great men. What is it exactly that you wanted to convey through that book, The Coming Revolution?
Sure. So there were sort of there are three parts to that book because it's still on sale. It's now 9 years that it's been out there and it's still on sale, which I'm very grateful for.
Wow.
And thank you to everybody who buys books and reads books.
Big ups to everybody there. If you got The Coming Revolution, big ups to you, man.
So I did a lengthy interview with Malema for that book. And then Shivambu analysed the policies of the EFF.
Yes.
At that stage,
what a great mind, by the way.
Yeah, no, completely. Might agree with him, might not agree with him, but
one of the smartest politicians we have in this country.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then Dali Mpofu looked at different aspects of forming the bedrock of the EFF.
Yes.
What are the legal and political undertones of forming a political party like that? So I was having a look at the interview I did with Malema. So that was in 2013. Remembering he had been expelled, or as he says, released from the ANC the year before.
Oh wow, what an interesting interview it must have been.
Yes, it was.
You caught him at the height of when things were just crumbling in his life, and also that's when he was starting to form the EFF. Yes.
But I must say that Monde, I was very, very fortunate because I was approached by Dr. Mboiseni Ndlozi and by Floyd Chibambu to do that interview for that book.
Wow.
They approached me and it was a privilege for me to take part in that.
And what happened to Andile Mtama then? Why couldn't you get input from him? Because he's claimed to say that he was a very integral part in forming some of the policies in the EFF, which obviously he's left the party now to start his own. So why couldn't you get input from him as well at that time? Because he was there in the formative years.
Yes, he was. Because it is a book about the EFF, driven by the leaders in the EFF, they made the decisions around how the book would look, how it should look. So it is published by Jacana, a highly independent force in our publishing world. But that is the way that it was framed, and that is the way it was conceptualized. As far as Andile goes, about 5 years ago, I worked with 5 colleagues in writing the Black Consciousness Reader. So Andile is part of that book.
Okay.
But for the purposes of the Coming Revolution, he wasn't, going to be included there. That said, Andile certainly did play a role in how the EFF's policies were formed. Yes, without a doubt. So Black First, Land First. Some of the policies that sort of drive the thinking around Black First, Land First are seen too in the EFF's own formation.
Wow, okay. Wow, that is so interesting. So, Jared, we don't want to waste your time. We know you've got other appointments to make. I just want to show on screen your latest work over here, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you who know me on a personal basis, if you're privileged to know a billionaire in your life, you've seen this book on my profile pictures. You've probably seen it on my status as well. It's Mr. Patrice Motsepe, An Appetite for Disruption. I was there at the launch. That's where we actually got to meet there in Rosebank. What a beautiful evening it was.
Yes.
Why Patrice Motsepe and why now? He's been a millionaire for close to 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So why now all of a sudden, and he's no longer very, should I say, active in the business world per se, like he's been throughout the past few years. He's obviously now the president of CAF rather. He's more focused on now giving back, as he would say in his own words. He's at a stage where he just wants to make an impact in the communities, in the country, in the continent of Africa at large. So why Patrice Motsepe now?
I think CAF has everything to do with it.
Yeah.
And as I said at the book launch, and I think I also mentioned it in the author's acknowledgements, when Motsepe became the president of CAF, I looked for a book to read about him because I love biographies. I love non-fiction in general, and there wasn't a book about Motsepe. Unbelievably, again, how can that be? How can there be no
a great
book
man,
about Patrice Motsepe?
a great man.
So I thought, well, hopefully I have the experience, hopefully I have the right credentials to approach it. I had a positive, I had a thumbs up from Jonathan Ball to do that. And so I set about doing it. And really for me, it was completely fascinating to be able to research Patrice Motsepe in those four frames, football, philanthropy, business, and then also to speculate around politics. Does he have any political ambitions?
Yeah.
And I still have not been able to answer that question. But let's just say that I think he has the energy. But I don't know if this moment is his political moment. It might still come.
And how do you get a hold of such a man? Like, have you sat with him before? Like, have you literally interviewed him? And how do you get... Because I remember one businessman, JT Fox, saying when you tried to have a meeting with him, like, his phone was constantly ringing, like, every 2 minutes. He had to send money. He had to direct maybe an executive to a particular meeting or to someone. How do you get hold of him, and how was meeting him?
Yeah, so I think what is very interesting about Motsepe, and advice also to all aspirant billionaires out there, I think he's done it in a very interesting way, how he's created his image and how he's protected his reputation.
Okay.
So to get hold of Patrice Motsepe will never be an easy task, even at the highest levels of journalism.
Yeah.
He is not accessible. That doesn't mean his people are not accessible.
Yes.
But he himself is not open to everybody. And I think partly it's because he trusts his people, so he doesn't think of himself as being the only voice who can speak for African Rainbow Minerals, who can speak for Sundowns,
yes,
who can speak for
Masandawana.
Exactly. I mean, his son right now is playing a role which his father has bestowed on him and entrusted to him. So I think that's an interesting thing in and of itself. Could Motsepe have stayed chairman of Sundowns? Yes, he could have. There were no rules in the CAF rule book that said you cannot be this. But he thought it was time to hand over. And when he talks about different projects that African Rainbow Minerals is involved in, or if you look at the diversification of those companies, he trusts other people to speak for his companies. And that is a very good piece of advice. Let's not always think that we are the only person who is capable of running our companies. No. Many other people are capable of doing these jobs.
Wow,
on
man.
our behalf. So I did set out to interview him, and I managed to speak to him, but right at the end of the process.
Wow, man, I can imagine. Wow, this is one of the people that inspire me. Just a short question, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. There's a lot of talk around Mr. Motsepe and how he actually got to accumulate his wealth. I remember there was a bit of a, debate of sorts during the launch. What do you think? Number one, do you think he's a sellout, in brackets there, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe this was a BEE deal. His wealth was a result of a BEE deal together with his brother-in-law, the president of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. Do you think it was some sort of BEE deal that were part of the CODESA negotiations, or this man has really worked hard for where he is to be where he is right now in life?
Yeah, I think hopefully the book does go some way to analysing that. But I think what is really difficult, Monde, is to accept that Motsepe is a capitalist through and through.
Yeah.
He is not an activist. He's not a socialist at home.
Yes.
He is a capitalist,
yes.
With intention. And so he saw a way forward in, let's say, even in the late 80s, as to how to make money as a South African under a new dispensation. He saw that laws were going to change around how labor had to be approached, how businesses would have to be run in a South African future. And he was by that stage already a lawyer with a very high profile at a very powerful law firm in Johannesburg. And he embarked on accumulating companies early on ahead of changes to let's say black economic empowerment. Well, there were no black economic empowerment laws at that time. They were still being framed, they were still being made, and he saw that coming. And so those people who say that he took advantage of BE should really be informed as to when he bought his companies and how he did it. So information, again, reading, informing yourself before you make statements is very useful in this world. So we might not like his politics, but did he take advantage of a system? I would hesitate to agree with that. In fact, I would say he did not, because that system was not yet in place.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Janet Smith, how much is the book? By the way, you can hold it up there with you. This is what you need to start promoting. We need to inhabit a reading culture in South Africa. That's your latest work right there. Can you just promote this book? Where can people get your other work? How much is it? And yes, how do people get in contact with you if they may be interested in them writing their autobiographies? Maybe you could be writing mine very soon, So I'm just waiting for folks to credit my article there of being a billionaire and so forth.
Your billionaire.
Yeah.
Never say never, by the way.
I'll never say never. You cannot write yourself off any single day, never.
No, and every day you wake up and you believe that, because otherwise we can't function, we can't create. So I think it's about 280 Rand, and it's available at all bookstores, all bookshops, as far as I can see. The publisher who published this, Jonathan Ball, is very, very good at distribution and marketing. And also anybody out there who wants to write, please do find yourself a good means of marketing yourself and your book, because it does help. It does help. It's many hours. Writing is painful. You need to have support when you're out there.
Beautiful, man. So Patrice Motsepe's book is out, ladies and gentlemen. The Coming Revolution is still in stores, by the way, and Life Too Short. Are we able to also get that one?
Yes, you are. And there'll be an updated version next year to mark the 30th anniversary. And just to say that I've loved working with other writers. I've also written The Black Consciousness Reader of All Things. It doesn't seem appropriate.
Are we invited to the 30th anniversary of Chris Hani's celebration?
Please.
Thank you, ladies. It's an exclusive. You find all the coverage of that from All Things Live TV. The billionaire from Alex has secured the rights of that, ladies and gentlemen. You know your point doesn't disappoint. So just quickly in passing, Janet, this is just the last question. Journalism, free speech. We've seen the likes of Donald Trump being censored from social media and all big platforms. Kanye West recently. And also a man called Andrew Tate, who's more right-wing aligned. And those men could be more right-wing aligned. What's your take on censorship, free speech, and do you think there's a particular target on right-wing people or just right-wing beliefs?
I think we should hear everything. Hence, I would say that I would still prefer to have access to those people than not have access to them. The only thing that I believe should be censored is promoting violence. In other words, trying to get people to act in a violent way on your behalf. I don't agree with that. But I do think, when it comes to say, Kanye West, I don't share his anti-Semitic points of view, but I think he makes them in a world that can have the freedom then to speak against him. So let's make sure that we also have the knowledge to be able to make coherent arguments against people we don't agree with.
Wow. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, from All Things Success for today. The author extraordinaire, the writer, best-selling. Guys, she's done it all. This is Mrs. Janet Smith giving us her account of her life's work and the great things she's done. Thank you so much once again, ma'am, for making time for us. We really, really appreciate it. All the best with what's coming in the future. May you just keep on writing those books, sharing those stories authentically and coherently so, ma'am. We really, really appreciate it. Get the books, ladies and gentlemen. Readers are leaders. Leaders are readers. Thank you so much, ma'am. And that's it from All Things Live TV. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Be great. We thank you so much.